What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tom here with Tom Ria Sports, and we're back with my good friend Josh, aka Fink, Finkelstein. Josh, it's been about a week or so. I know you've had some illness. I've been super busy. I hope the holidays are well. How's everything going, my brother?
Good. How about yourself?
Good, good. We talked a little bit about some craziness going on outside of the work life, but everything's good. Can't complain. Holidays were good. Your holidays were good. Everyone's good there.
Yeah, all good.
Good, good. All right, let's jump right into it. Obviously, it's been a little bit. We have some good baseball news, some really fun stuff. The most recent stuff, I know you're super excited. A lot of Mets fans are. Mets pulled the big fish, made the trade, got Lindor. Let's just talk a little bit about that. Talk about what they gave up and what went into the trade.
So people are aware of of what the actual deal was. The Mets got Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco, in exchange for Josh Wolf, Isaiah Green, Andres Jimenez, and Ahmed Rosario.
Right.
Um, let let's get this out of the way. If you're a Mets fan that has an issue with this deal, you just are assuming everything's going to go wrong at all times because
Yeah,
there's
right.
literally nothing to complain about with this deal as a Mets fan. You gave up nobody in your top. You gave up one prospect in your top 10, which the top 10 of the Mets system is not that good to begin with outside of the top five, really.
Right.
And then you gave up a mid-teens prospect in Isaiah Green, and you gave up two shortstops that you would have absolutely no use for with Francisco Lindor at shortstop. And you got a number two starter that was deemed as a salary dump in this deal that's making $12 million next season.
Yeah, a
I
huge deal. A
$12
huge
million
deal.
for a number two starter is not something to complain about. The Mets are legit contenders now, and if you're upset about this deal, you are just expecting everything to go wrong at this point and there's no move that would make you happy this offseason because there is no way to sit there and look at acquiring a 27-year-old shortstop in their prime that's arguably a top 10 player in the game and saying that's a bad move. He's a
Right.
phenomenal player. And the fact that you got a number two starter in the deal as well and barely gave up any talent in return, this is honestly highway robbery on the Mets end. But the Cleveland Indians had no other choice, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say that. And now, so for the Mets, sticking with them, my first question when I looked at the trade was obviously because it was great. I'm not necessarily a Mets fan, but I definitely root for them. I so now my question for you is really they're gonna have to sign him to a long-term deal, I would think, because he's a free agent at the end of the year. So I'm sure that'll happen sometime soon. I expect it fully too, a big extension. Does this take them out of the race for LeMahieu, or does this still maybe there's a chance there?
I mean, I think the Mets are going to stick in almost every bidding that they've been in. Outside of maybe Trevor Bauer, I don't think they're really going to pursue that anymore.
Right.
Um, I do think I don't see them getting LeMahieu. I don't think I ever really saw that being real likely, though. I
Right.
think I think I always viewed Springer as the more likely of the two. And going on that, Springer very much is in doubt now, I would say.
Is that a
I
financial thing, or do you think there's
I
just
think
more interest out there?
it's a financial issue, and it's not because Cohen does not have the money to spend it. It's because it logistically does not make a lot of sense to spend it to an extent. Because if you cross the luxury tax too many years in a row, you start losing draft picks. And you don't want to start doing that now when you also know you're going to have to extend Michael Conforto and at least one of Noah Syndergaard and Marcus Stroman but before in the next year or so.
Right.
So it I don't think it's completely out of the question yet with Springer. However, it is in doubt, I would say. They are no longer the shoe-in favorite for George Springer. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because the fact is Francisco Lindor is a better player than George Springer. And
Absolutely.
if you had to pick between the two, you take Francisco Lindor every day of the week. As much as George Springer is would be a great addition, he brings a lot to the table. He is not Francisco Lindor. George Springer is a very good player. Francisco Lindor is an elite player. So there is a gap between the two, and Lindor it certainly is the better of the two options. As much, and considering they didn't give up much, it never made sense to pick George Springer over Francisco Lindor. Lindor was the guy.
Right, right. No, I definitely agree. I like what they did. I think it was an amazing move. Really, just a tremendous start for the offseason for the Mets. Also with McCann, obviously, so I can't say full start. But my next question, I guess, where do they go at third base then? Since LeMahieu's probably out, are they just going to roll with JD Davis, give him a shot, maybe try to get a cheaper veteran or something like that? What's the deal with third base? That's my one concern really with the Mets is what they're going to do there.
Well, there was a shot kind of taken by Sandy Alderson at the presser yesterday that I found very interesting. I'm sure he did not mean it in that way, but when asked if JD Davis was the starting third baseman in 2021, his response was, "We have Luis Guillorme too." So, so that real, and he's alluded multiple times to not being impressed with him defensively, JD Davis at third. And
Right.
I'm not either. I don't buy it. They're going into opening day with him as the third baseman. My bet now, what there is talks about now, Bob Nightingale of USA Today reported yesterday that the Mets are talking to the Cubs about Chris Bryant.
Hmm.
And on top of it, um, Michael Mayer of Metsmerized actually reported the Mets are talking to the Mariners about Kyle Seager as well. So they're shopping for a third baseman.
Seager
That
wouldn't be bad. I actually could see Seager there just because he had a pretty. I mean, last year was a short year, but he was pretty solid last year. And he's been somewhat consistent. His average is usually really down, but he's a decent fielder. Hits for some power. Like they wouldn't be asking for much out of him. The Mets just need someone who could field at third base. Really, let's be real about it. Their
yeah,
lineup is already stacked. Their pitching looks good. Bullpen is solid. Like all they need is somebody at third base and center field, really, who can field, who can make plays when needed. Simple as that.
I think you're getting to the point now in the off season with the Mets that like they really only need to fill one of them with a legit player.
Right.
The other spot, truly speaking, can probably be a defensive minded player.
Agreed.
You
Agreed.
don't need to go. They do not need to go crazy right now with what do going forward. Now on the pitching end, they probably want another reliever. They probably want another starter. But outside of that, I mean, the big move has been made.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, they can make another big move. They can afford to do it if they want to. Um, but I think we are at the point now where this is really more making the team you want at this point as compared to doing what you have to do. This
Right.
is this team going into the season right now could probably compete for the division. If you add more to it, all the merrier, and you make your chances of winning the division much higher in a tough division with the Atlanta Braves, truly as the team to beat currently.
Right. Right. So if they don't go Springer, do they look at a Jackie Bradley Jr. or is there somebody else out there that's on your list? Because like you said, maybe they go a defensive minded way. Is there someone else other than Springer just saying maybe he is too much for them right now? Where else would they go there?
So I would, well, actually, Mike Mayer also of Metsmerized again. Actually,
Shameless
he,
plug. Shameless plug.
yeah, yeah. He he reported yesterday also that the Mets were talking to Jackie Bradley Jr. recently.
Okay.
So I do think that is definitely an option on the table currently. I think another couple of options to look at as maybe more defensive minded, not really meant to be everyday necessarily players. Watch out for a return of Jake Marisnick as an option and Albert Elmora Jr.
Hmm.
Those are
That's
two
interesting.
names I would consider as like possible candidates for that type of situation. And when it comes to third base, so I'm not my. I was actually talking to my dad recently about this, but Marwin Gonzalez, I could see being an option given that he's versatile and they're not necessarily looking for an everyday option at third base currently. They could get an everyday option there, but I don't know if that's necessarily the complete goal there. And I mean, now I don't think this one's going to happen, and I think there's a lot of issues multiple issues that would need to be settled before this could possibly be a thing. But I could see Justin Turner in a Met uniform again. Now, there is a lot of bad blood between the Mets and Justin Turner from his time with the Mets, because Sandy Alderson is also the one who cut him because of his attitude, because of a perceived attitude issue. And on top of it, Justin Turner is reportedly asking for a 4-year deal, which
That's what
he's
I was
not
going to
getting.
say. Yeah, I was going to jump in and say that. I read that the other day, and that's crazy to me. I would never give him 4 years.
If he gets more than 2, I would be absolutely stunned. I don't even think he gets. I don't think he gets even a team option from a team past the second year. He'll get a 2-year deal if he wants it. I think he's
Right.
not getting 4. Nothing close to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I was thinking about as soon as you mentioned his name was 4 years is just that's outlandish. Okay, so that makes sense though. So third base wise, I mean, obviously the jury's still out, and like you said, they could very well just say screw it and go out and get Springer. Yeah, I mean, or maybe even try LeMahieu. I think that's really off the table. I think at this point with LeMahieu, he's probably going back to the Yankees because I just can't vision him in a Toronto uniform. If he really cares about money that much, then maybe he will. But I just and maybe the years are important, all that stuff. But to me, he just seems like a guy who cares about winning. And other than the Mets and Yankees, there really is no other team that I see out there that really provides him with a great chance to win a World
There's another
Series.
one.
Who's the other
There's
one?
another.
Who's the other one?
I actually think it's become less and less likely he's going back to the Yankees. I think every day he's out on the free agent market, it's becoming less and less likely. I think the team to be scared of, and I think there are 2 teams to be scared of if you're the Yankees. I think Toronto is still a team to be scared of, and I think the Dodgers are now in the mix as well.
Dodgers, yeah.
And if you're talking about a winning situation, the Dodgers are a better winning situation than the Yankees currently.
Than
So
anybody.
you
Than
should be
anybody, yeah.
scared of them if they make a competitive offer. You should be a little nervous about that.
Yeah, definitely. No, and you know what? And we talked about it too, like just a real quick like insight as far as how most Yankee fans feel. Like we want him back for sure. But if it doesn't work out, I'm still confident in what we do. Like we've talked about some of his age and the amount of years he's going to get, and it would be a blow. Like it would suck losing him. He's definitely our best all-around hitter and one of the best in the entire league. But I'm not giving him 5 years. I don't even really want to give him 4 years. So, but he's going to get what he wants at some point, and we'll see what happens there. But let's talk about the other big news that happened right around Christmas time, I believe. We'll start off first with Blake Snell getting traded to the Padres. That was obviously some huge news too. What kind of went into that? I mean, I remember it was funny. I remember after he got pulled in that World Series game, me and you were talking, and you said you kind of knew somebody inside Tampa and that he wasn't happy. And you were saying that there is a chance that some changes might get made. So let's just talk a little bit about that trade and kind of, it seemed almost, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but just kind of a shock, especially after how well he performed in the playoffs and things like that.
I think this is going to be a common theme of the offseason. This is what led to the Mets Lindor deal and with Carrasco involved, and this is what led to both the San Diego Padres deals. Teams are looking to dump salary because of what happened this past year with COVID and what could happen this coming year with COVID. Teams are looking to shed contracts left and right, thinking they are losing money. Now, do I think that those reasons are justified? No. I think it's terrible for the game that these teams are moving salary. That being said, Tampa Bay has always had this issue. This is not an issue that was just exclusive to COVID. They have a money issue in general. Blake Snell's deal is actually pretty cheap, but they have a history of doing this. This is a common theme. And I will say this about Tampa. As much as we will criticize their money-shedding move today, I guarantee you at least 2 of those 4 players outperform expectations and are all of a sudden superstars. And we're sitting here crying ourselves to sleep about – the San Diego Padres are crying themselves to sleep when they realize that they traded Blake Snell right at the point where he was going to start to be bad, and they realized that the Padres just gave up 2 of the better players in baseball in the deal.
It's literally like clockwork with that team. I marvel, even as a Yankee fan, I respect them, their organization so much, just what they're able to do, how they're able to, convert prospects that no one cares about. I mean, not only do people know about him or not know about him, some teams do know about him and they're like, he's not what we thought he was. You can have him kind of thing, I mean, I always go back to that Chris Archer trade. Obviously, Glass now is big, but I mean Meadows too. Like that trade was just unreal. How lopsided that was. That was
You
one of the
see,
most lopsided trades in the last like 20 years.
it was that I will say in fairness, it, not to because I do think this is worth noting. They happened to that was like the perfect storm for a terrible deal because the Pirates front office is the worst group of talent evaluators you will ever find. On top of it, next to the best group of talent evaluators, where someone that works concessions is a better talent evaluator than the Pirates GM.
Oh man, that's great. That's great. And one thing, it's funny too. You were talking about their money issues. I was just reading too in that article that we had posted. I'll pull it up again. It was saying that Snell only gets paid 11 million, and I was like, oh, that's not much. And then it said it was 20% of their salary, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense why they did the move. I think that's really what you touched on, a big part of it. But let's swing it to the Padres real quick. So what does this mean for them? I mean, he's got to be their number one guy now, most likely, or number two maybe. But where
Well,
does
their
this
number
take
one
him?
guy is Yu Darvish
Right.
now.
Who? Yeah, we'll talk about him in a second. But
Yeah.
let's stick on Snell real quick. What is this kind of just adding another lefty to that rotation and a team that's going for it? Which I love to see. I love to see a team just going all out for it. They recognize their window's small and they're shooting for the stars. So tell me a little bit about what this trade means, and then we'll get on to Darvish right after.
I mean, when they made this deal, it was clear they were going for it to begin with. The deal they made the next day kind of solidified that they're not just going for it; they're going all in, pretty much. The thing about Snell, though, that I think is intriguing, if you're the Padres, is that you didn't make this deal just for this season. He could be here for this year, next year, the year after that. He has a good contract, a reasonable contract. The likelihood is he has a pretty high ceiling, truly speaking, about being able to be. I don't know that I really have ever considered him a true ace. I think he's a high end 2 or a low end 1. But either way, this is the thing too with the Padres is they made both of those deals, and their farm system still is in the top 5 probably in all of baseball because they didn't trade a single one of their top 3 prospects, which that is impressive to make 2 deals of that magnitude and not relinquish any of your top 3.
Right. Right. And now let's get on. Yeah, let's go right to the Darvish one because that was obviously huge. And like you said, that's probably going to be their ace. So I'm just going to pull up what the trade entailed right here. So they get Darvish, they get his catcher of choice, Caratini, right?
Yeah.
They give up Davies, they give up the 11 guy, 13, 15, 16, according to MLB Pipeline. So do you know anything I know you just said their farm system still looks good. Did the Cubs get a nice haul here, or was this another one where it was just really a salary dump and they kind of were in a position where they felt they had to do this?
Salary dump. That's what this is about. This is about the Cubs. I mean, they've wanted to dump salary for the last year and a half or so now, but this was a salary dump. Listen, did they get an awful return? Considering Darvish's deal is not exactly cheap. You see, that's the difference between the Darvish deal and the Snell deal. Darvish's deal is actually somewhat of a bad contract in the long haul.
Right.
The Snell deal, there's no way to put it that was bad for the Padres. That's a good contract. For most teams, that's fine. Tampa, it's not. They're an exception to that rule. But for the most part, Blake Snell's deal is pretty widely viewed throughout the game as a bargain. Yu Darvish is not a bargain, and he's 34. So this was a salary dump. He's still good. It will still help. But that contract was a true salary dump. And this is what I'll also say is it's not an awful return, given that as you go back up to the return quickly.
Yep.
As you can see, they traded, according to MLB Pipeline, their number 11th, 13th, 15th, and 16th prospects, plus Zach Davies, to get Darvish. Those 4 prospects, if you put them in the New York Mets farm system, would be 7 through 10 or 11.
Right.
Not to say that's, and the Cubs do not have a strong farm system either. So they added depth to the farm system. I question the amount of actual talent they added, but they added length to the farm system. And these are the types of prospects you can use later in a deal to get a decently helpful piece at like the trade deadline if you somehow are in contention. I mean, these are prospects too that could also just be useful players in the league in general. But the point is that for the Cubs, you shed the salary and you also lengthen the farm system that currently is not that deep for them.
So yeah, my next question, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. So if you don't know, I apologize. But I know Darvish. I think he signed a 7-year, like $157 million deal, something like that, a few years back with the Cubs. So what's like what are the Padres picking up in that? If you know, like roughly, doesn't have to be exact. And then what is their salary? It's a two-part question. What does their salary really look like? Because I know, or not their, yeah, they're capped. Like what is? Because I know they have Machado, they have Hosmer, they have Will Myers. Now they add in Darvish, they add in Snell. Like, they're going to have to pay Tatis at some point. I mean, I'm sure he's probably locked under for a few more years, but I'm just curious. Are they over the luxury tax? Are they near it? What's that situation for them salary wise?
Padres, to my knowledge, are nowhere near it currently.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but they also aren't a team that's expected to get to that level either.
Right.
That's one thing to consider. I mean, they are not going to they are not going to exceed the luxury tax by any absurd number. So, I mean, I listen, and Darvish I think has like 4 years, 90 something million left. They picked up a lot of money in this deal. I don't think it's a contract that will hamper them forever. And the fact is, right now, Darvish is an ace. And as long as he keeps up that production, he'll be worth every penny of that deal.
Yeah.
And if they win a championship with him as any sort of notable piece of the team, it's all worth it.
Right.
So
I love it, man. I love it. You know, I said it. I'll say it again. I love the fact they went for it. You look at this rotation. I mean, Darvish, Snell, Lamet, Paddock. They still have Gore in the farm system. They'll have Clevenger next year. It's just they're pretty much looking at it like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see it is they're looking at it like, hey, we got 2, maybe 3 years tops to win this. Like, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, let's go all in. I'm sure they'll make more trades at the deadline. I'm sure they'll try to fill a weakness in there. Do you see or hear any other news for them? Like, do you see it like maybe they go for a bullpen piece? Is there anything else with the Padres you could see them trying to do? Or do you think they're all set and they're just going to roll into the season with what they have now, which is very good. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just curious if there's another direction you think they could go in.
their GM AJ Preller is one of those guys that will make a ton of moves whenever, and you don't really know what he's thinking half the time. So I would not put it past them to make another big deal. They are notorious for making big moves with AJ Preller in charge. Not always the smartest, but big nonetheless. I think they could go into the season today if they wanted to and compete. I think they're in a very similar position to the Mets going into the season. They don't need to do anything, but they absolutely could. They could use a bat still, I would say, although their lineup is very good already, but I think they could possibly use an outfielder. Although now that they got a Ha-Seong Kim from
Saw that
Korea,
from Korea. Yeah.
they are moving Jake Cronenworth to the outfield. So they, I don't know. I don't know what they need specifically on paper. They could use an outfielder theoretically if they don't really believe in Cronenworth there long term.
Right.
But now it's really more about see what you can do to build a contender rather than just making big moves. You're looking at making the additions that turn your club from the team that gets eliminated in the NLCS to the team that wins the World Series.
Right. Right. Okay. So my last question about this, and we'll touch on one more thing, and then we'll sign off. Mets, Padres both go to the season what they are right now. Who finishes with a better record and who goes deeper into the playoffs if they get there?
Padres finish with a better record. Mets go deeper into the playoffs.
Okay. All right. I'm
Ne-
gonna I'm
ne-
gonna write that down, and we'll see what happens come October.
I'll tell you why, because they probably both face each other in the wild card game, and there's nobody that's beating Jacob deGrom in a wild card game.
I like that. I like that prediction. All right. I'm with you too. He's the best pitcher in the game, in my opinion. All right. So last thing, and then we'll sign off really, really quick. Sagano, unfortunately, didn't make it to MLB, like you said earlier before we went on air. Kind of an climatic turnout for him. So what happened? He just couldn't find the right deal. Teams weren't as interested as maybe people thought early on. What do you think went into like him just going back to Japan?
I think interest that wasn't to the level he was hoping for. And I also think there was a lack of motivation on his part to actually want to come over to the States, especially because his team in Japan, the Yomiuri Giants, um, they he ended up signing a 4-year deal with them that includes 3 opt-outs, basically an opt-out after every season of the deal. So there's no reason for him to
Rush and come
to
here
rush
now.
to get here in the
Yeah.
middle of COVID-19,
Right.
in the middle of amidst everything that's been going on in this country for the last few years now.
Yeah.
There was not much of a reason to rush to get here at this stage. The fact is, he can go back to Japan for one more season. If he has a career year, look at offers again, and then he comes to the States. Or if he hates the offers he's getting still, he stays in Japan. If he's terrible, he stays in Japan. He has a lot of luxury here. They're really, truly speaking, unless if he got an offer that he couldn't refuse, it did not make a lot of sense to come over here.
Right. Right. That's great. Hey, great stuff as always. You're the man, brother. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're back on your feet doing well. Everybody who's listening, watching, make sure to check out my man Josh at Metsmerize Online. He's a social media coordinator and editor. Big news out of the Mets. Hope everyone had a great holiday. Josh, thanks for joining as always, and we'll be in touch soon, my brother.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
You too.